going to go ahead and call this meeting to order and declare a quorum of 7 members present. You two separate. Okay, yeah. We'll start with item C1, consideration, discussion, and possible action related to the 2017-18 student enrollment update. Dr. Ely. I could hear me, but I can't hear you.
It's on. Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Yokin, members of the board. Our first item on the agenda for our workshop meeting is to talk about our enrollment update, and we've got good news in regards to that on a number of fronts. And so with an update on where we are for 2017-18 to begin the school year, it's Mike Martindale, Deputy Superintendent and Chief Financial Officer. Mr. Martindale.
Thank you, Dr. Ely. As I was preparing the presentation this evening, I reflected back on last September. This presentation was easier to prepare than last September. As we move, these numbers for our projections in current enrollment, the projections are from our demographer from last April, and the enrollment numbers you see are current as of this morning. I'll start with our elementary schools. We are tracking fairly close at all of our elementary schools, more above our projected number than the number that are projected less. College Hills Elementary, 741. We have projected 762. And if you remember last year, College Hills Elementary was one that really blew up on us unexpectedly. So we've kind of got a handle on that one and got its staff situated accordingly. Creekview, 15 above projected number from Templeton in April. Forest Ridge, a little bit stronger at a plus 50. Greens Prairie also running ahead of projections. Pebble Creek is 13 fewer than what we had projected for this school year. Rock Prairie at 638 versus 626, and they were actually tracking a little light the week prior to school and then picked up after school got going. South No at a half dozen above. The one probably with the greatest degree of difference, Southwood Valley is at 643. We originally projected them to be at 701, and then Spring Creek at 654, which is higher, which is surprising. But again, considering the location of Spring Creek and Greens Prairie, growth is not surprising there. The rate of is a little quicker than we had originally anticipated. So again, on the positive side, more so than not as we move into the fourth week of this school year.
What do you attribute the Southwood Valley being? Or is it just?
Ms. Schaefer, I have no idea why we're tracking off on that one at all, to be perfectly honest with you. I kept waiting for it to pick up, kind of like South Knoll and Rock Prairie, because they will have a little bit of a mobile population that's influenced by the university and rental property and graduate students, or they have young families coming in, but they never really took off relative to South Knoll and Rock Prairie. So I honestly couldn't answer that for you at this point in time.
Just visually, when you go through those streets, there's a lot of houses that are still available.
For rent.
I think we've probably gotten saturated, and then when you have a choice, perhaps just the age of the home makes a difference to some families versus really understanding what the impact on which school you go to.
Yes. So still a much better situation for us than what we were encountering last year when we had a significantly slower growth rate than what we're seeing now. At the intermediate level, Cypress Grove, we're almost mark on with that, almost exactly. A handful off at Oakwood, Pecan Trail, again, it kind of following suit with Spring Creek and Greens Prairie to some degree. They're tracking a little bit stronger than we had originally anticipated. What makes these a little bit difficult too when we project opening new campuses, you have grandfathering implications, because you got to remember the fifth graders had the opportunity to stay at the sixth grade. So we collect that information in advance, but there's nothing to prevent the kiddos from changing their mind and making a shift at the end. So that can always influence the numbers to some degree, which is the case, I think, when we move to the secondary or to our high school is when we look at those. But we're in pretty good shape from the intermediate level and in line with our projections. At the secondary level, or beginning with grades 7 and 8, AMC on Mass, we projected 931. We're at 913 as of today. College Station Middle School is a +3 over our projection. Our biggest swings are at the high schools. We projected 1790 and 1950. You can see we're running 50 greater at College Station High School and lighter at Consol as well. I do think that we have a variance on that with our grandfathering of about 30. So about 30 kiddos, for example, had communicated they wanted to grandfather at Consol. There were over 200 kids eligible to grandfather at both high schools. So we had a significant, this could have moved on us actually more than it has, to be quite honest with you. But we had 30 kids that we knew wanted to grandfather at Consol, but because of transportation issues and being rezoned to CSHS, they ended up at CSHS. So that played a little bit in these numbers. I can't tell you the full difference is that, but that attributed to a little bit of the swing in College View High School. Tracking on. From a total standpoint, Templeton had projected 13,555. Honestly, a number that I was using was 13,580, so I had it projected a little bit stronger than that because I had numbers up through May and June. As of today, we're 13,650, so we're beyond both of those numbers. Our snapshot that we submitted in the fall to the state last year was 13,200. So today, we're 13,650. And that's a growth of 3.41. That is, if you recall, we utilized a 2.9% on our projections, and we use that for our budgeting purposes as well. So again, we're tracking on the positive side of that as opposed to the wrong side of it.
What day in October is the October date? Is it the 1st or 31st?
Fourth Friday.
It's the end of the month, yes, ma'am. And what would typically happen, Dr. Yokin, if history holds true, we tend to continue to go up through Peem State. So it's quite possible. Actually, this was a little bit larger when I left my office a few minutes ago. So it's quite possible in relation to our Peem submission, that percentage could grow a little bit more. This is just a graph of our snapshot enrollments, that Peems, that end of October snapshot versus where we are currently. Here's last year at 13,200. This is where we are as of today, 13,650. Something that's interesting, if you look back at 2010-11, you can see the growth of the district over 7 years, up over 3,000, so almost by a third in that span of time since 2010 to 2017. You can also see where our growth flattened out a little bit in the slope of our line from 15-16 to 16-17, but it is starting to tick up again. It falls more in line with previous years that we've experienced. This is just percent growth off that enrollment number from snapshot. So we're tracking 3.41% over previous year. Again, here's our slowed growth that we had to manage last year. So we're coming back in line to what we have historically seen for the last number of years. So in a good place, much better place than we were previously. I'd be happy to answer any questions from the board. Of course, on the regular agenda later this evening, there are a couple of class size waivers. That's for a couple of classes at South Knoll and Pebble Creek as well. We have a couple of classrooms with 23 kids in it as opposed to 22. So,
As of today, how many students do we have because of weather impact?
38.
Marla has yet to hit.
38 is what we had this morning.
just to share with the rest of the group, we would have expected some to come from Harvey, and they shared with us that executive that we had some from Irma as well. So that's why I made the comment that it's not unreasonable to think that maybe we would have some impact from Marla. Thank you. We'll move on to C2, consideration, discussion, and possible action related to middle school branding. Dr. Ely.
Thank you, Dr. Yokin, members of the board. As we went through the boundary adjustment process during the beginning of the 2016-17 school year, we had the opportunity to have a lot of discussion regarding what our secondary schools should look like and how kids would move through the system of our schools. During that discussion at the board level, there was some talk among the team to examine our intermediate schools, our middle schools especially, but also our intermediate schools and elementaries, and the brands and the identities that they have, and potentially not having them linked to one of our two comprehensive high schools. So we took that information after finishing up the process last spring of enacting board policy FC local. We put this on last month to kind of start the conversation, to have the board kind of explore what our thoughts are as a group in relation to those comments. What I have in front of you right there is what I handed out last week, which is just some information regarding some various aspects of that. I'll just give your attention to number one, the programming for intermediate middle schools versus high schools for both athletics and fine arts. That process is going to begin this semester. We're going to work through both our fine arts staff, Mr. Reed, Mr. Martindale will be facilitating that process, and we'll be working out what that staffing looks like for fine arts. We'll be doing the same thing for athletics. So that's going to be handled as we go through the fall semester of this school year. The other thing that we talked about were at least last week, were some colors and mascots. Is there an appetite, or is there a discussion to be had to perhaps changing those and giving our middle schools, especially, their own unique brand that are not tied in with either a color or a same mascot as our comprehensive high schools? And then the last thing, which is the one that we probably will talk about least this evening, don't know exactly, but was really the physical plant. If we wanted to make some changes aesthetically to the fits and finishes of our existing two middle schools, to remove some of the purple and the maroon from that, what would that cost? And we had a line by line information for you there. So, in speaking with the executive committee midweek last week, I think we'd like to start off the conversation and just talking about not necessarily the fit and finish aspects of this, but more about the climate and culture aspects of having schools that are below the high school level have some of their practices, identities, things that they do tied in with the high school. So that's, I think, somewhere we want to start. But Dr. Yokin, you may want to take us in a slightly different direction or frame that a little differently.
No, and I think you did a great job of framing it. As Dr. Ely mentioned, I think that there are obviously several aspects that have to be considered before a final decision would be made. But I think it's important that we focus on what I would call culture and how we want the culture of the school district to go forward. I think for me, the thing that hits so strongly is that we're going to have 25,000 students when the school district is built out. We heard tonight that we already have 13,600. The estimation is that we're going to have 3 high schools and 4 middle schools, 4 intermediate schools, and more elementaries than we can probably all remember the names of. And with that, it seems it might be appropriate to have a rich discussion on how is the best way to take the district forward. I mean, part of what we have focused on in the last 2 years is that transformation of CSISD from a very small community district to a larger district, because that has happened and will continue as the influx of students comes. And I think it's important that we are proactive on how that's going to be handled versus reactive, because it helps set expectations not only for the community, but the students, and then the boards that come after us of how we see the way to keep CSISD, all schools good, all schools as thought of as being part of a positive community atmosphere, if that makes sense. I think that Dr. Lee pointed out that the concerns that we've had voiced to us in the past have been around athletics. My kids never played football, so that one I just sit quiet on, because when you run around in a circle, all the circles are the same. They are. You can go anywhere in the United States except if you go to oversized indoor track. But also the concern about fine arts, and we've obviously had some experience with going from elementaries into the various middle schools because we within our school district start kids as early as we can on some of these things, but I think we need to talk about what we want it to look like. What are the kinds of things that we think are important? And yes, money is going to be an issue. I get that. But if we start with money, we're not ever going to think about what should be done. And I think we need to be certain that we've identified what should be done and then what can be done as a second entity. And with that, I'd like to hear your comments. Ferris, help me out here.
Well, I like the idea of us talking about culture versus money. And one of the things I've been thinking about as far as the money is, we can decide what we think is the right thing as a group, and then we can phase in. I mean, we've overcome money issues before. I mean, we had that look at what we did last year with a drop in student population, and children were able to learn. We had lots of awards and didn't seem to miss a beat as far as education was concerned when we had less money to work with. And so I think it's important for us to, as a group, decide what we think we want the culture of the district to look like. Some of the things that we do talk about is that, we hate seeing our community divided by color as far as that's class. I mean, that is like color of uniforms, to be divided by uniform colors. Let me say it that way. I'm sure that'll be on the news. Uniform colors, and that, I think that we can find a way that helps foster that. And maybe it is through rebranding. I mean, one of the things that I continue to hate to see is when, you go to CSMS and you still have two colors over there. And now that they are going to split that way, I guess that's more appropriate. But it just, I don't know. They want to be proud of what their school building looks like and what they're doing. And I think that our principals do a great job of trying to deal with that culture, but it's still there, how we handle those things. And I know there's other districts that we've seen. I think we were talking, was it in the Fort Worth area where the superintendent came in, somewhere in that area? I remember us going to a meeting that they decided that they needed to change the outside of that building because they wanted those kids to be proud to go there, and it really changed how people thought. Where was that?
Northwest ISD, north of Fort Worth.
North of Fort Worth, and how important, how it changed the culture and how it changed the community. And so I think that's where I fall on that is, do we need to do that? Do we need to have pride within just our schools? like they do at the elementary schools. We've talked about that before, is that they have their own identity and they don't think about all the other stuff. And I know that there are some people it's very important that they put on a purple shirt or they put on a maroon shirt all the way through. Of course, I also understand that that's not what educates children either. So I don't know. It's so hard. But anybody can jump in at this point. And
I guess the thing that hits me and I think you did a good job of identifying some of the key points in my mind is that we see that some individuals start when they're in 5th grade deciding what color shirt they're going to wear in high school. And we saw the emotion that goes along with that when we went through the boundary adjustment last fall. And I understand that, but I also can see with the amount of growth that's going to go on in the school district and the amount of effort that we put into the policy we put into place last spring, the lines are going to change. And they're going to have to change based on the students and the kinds of students that come in. And when I say kinds of students, there may be 1 year that it's all in 5th grade. It may be, you don't know. It's not necessarily that you can say, well, you can only bring one kindergarten or one middle school. The families are what they are. And we're right now stepping off into this new era, if you will, by opening the Pecan Trail and Welborn Middle School. And as Dr. Yulee has shared with us, they are not the end. There's going to be middle school 4. There's going to be intermediate 4. And on some of the forecasts, there's been mentioned that there have to be 5 5th, 6th schools. And so it does seem like perhaps there would be some prudence to identify how to be sure that our students are proud of where they're at today and enjoying that versus looking 4 years, 6 years ahead, because we can't guarantee that's where they're going to go to school.
I mean, I don't know, I feel like I said this at the last board meeting, but I mean, I think I've been pretty consistent in saying I believe that our middle schools should have their own unique culture. Just period, the end. I think there's so many benefits to our district for that to happen without the pressure of high school or thinking about high school or thinking one thing and then having it change or whatever it is. They should be proud of where they are, who they are, not where they intend to go in the future. And I don't like the look of some of those numbers in terms of what that's going to take to change our existing things, although clearly we don't have to do it all at one time. But obviously making that decision now with a brand new one coming on this is our opportunity to do it. And I've asked around. I haven't asked an enormous number of people, talking with them about this. But the people that I have talked to, I've yet to hear a person say this is not a good idea. I've not heard one person stand up and say, no, I want my middle school to feed into high school and that they should all be wearing that color. I just haven't heard it. So to me, this is the logical decision. It's a rational choice based off of a lot of different information that we're all bringing to the table. And I think part of that's what we experienced during boundary readjustment. I think part of it's just we've got 3 schools that are divvying up into multiple places. And even when, 7 or 8 years from now, even when we have another high school, I will not be here by then, I can promise you. But when that does happen, this is a whole process is going to start all over again. There's no guarantee that those 3 middle schools are going to be feeder schools for high schools. And everybody could easily just continue to be split. So in my mind, this is the time where this is the cheapest it's ever going to cost us to do this from a money perspective. And I think it's the right time from an emotional perspective to say, we're going to let our middle schools be middle schools. And I think it's okay if we want to kind of pair our intermediate and middle together, because they're always going to go in pairs. I think that's fine, but to me, it's a no-brainer decision. And I mean, across last meeting and this meeting, and obviously not everybody's talked tonight, but just haven't heard anybody make a rational argument for not doing it this way. So,
Not that,
I'm sure will change that.
for once, I think I might somewhat agree with what Dr. Weston said.
First time, all right.
I think I'm going to bring maybe a little context to it. Again, I think the money thing's going to take care of the money thing, but I think as we kind of rebrand those, I still think that when we're rebranding them, I think the improvements is very important, because I think that if we're going to start fresh, I think the older schools need to have kind of like a freshen up myself. So I think that's I see that as a benefit, because everybody at that point starting fresh, they're not going to have some of the older stuff. And also, I can probably justify on some of the things as I list through some of the items that we're going to possibly spend money on. Some of those improvements we'd be making in the next few years anyhow. So I think it's good to have everybody do it at one time and everything be fresh.
I think that's a very good point. As I look at this philosophically, it occurs to me that there's the fundamental question of whether or not we can offer the same quality of programming at the middle school. That's primarily what I'm worried about. 5th and 6th is probably a little bit different animal. But if we can offer the same quality of programming at a middle school when we don't have feeder patterns versus when we do. If the answer to that is no, then I think we have maybe some re-examining of some fundamental issues we have. And to give you an example, next year we'll have 3 middle schools and 2 high schools. Right? So somebody's got to split with those numbers. So are we going to set up by design one school that we have admitted from the get-go will not offer the same quality of programming from the others if we don't split it? What I'm getting at here is, at the end of the day,
Wait, what?
Glad you're clarifying.
well, and you're right, and it's because it's a hard thing for me, because we're going to end up with 4 and 3 at the end of the day. We're at 3 and 2 next year. We have to split. Somebody's got to split. So then the question is, how do we do it? Right? I mean, that's our fundamental question. And if we're committed to it, and we're committed to having each one of these schools have its own unique culture and identity, are those your words? Okay, then I'm going to make them yours then. Then I think we do it. I'm less worried about, quite frankly, the dollars, because I think that Mr. Schaefer raises a good point, and there are different ways to do it as it fits in the budget. I mean, there's a routine maintenance schedule that some of this stuff rolls up on, and we can just make sure it gets done in an orderly fashion. But to me, the far bigger issue is, are we committed to the culture of it? Because it's the 7 team of 8 here as a starting point, but it's a whole lot more than that. It's administrators that work on Dr. Ely's team, on down to the principals of these schools, their entire staffs at those schools, but then more importantly, students and their families. And we have to have everybody buy into that if this is going to work, because it is different. We all remember the day when you started in a school district. Some of you who aren't from here may not, but I know you do, Quinn. I mean, you put on your maroon shirt on Friday night, and for the new ones now who are in the purple zone, they put on their purple shirt on Friday night. They knew who they were. What we're saying is fundamentally different than that. And I think we need to recognize it, because whether it's a rational argument or not against it, there is an emotional argument against it and an emotional appeal against it because it's going to be a difficult change. And I think we need to weigh that, and if we're committed, recognize it, and then figure out how we go about making it as easy on people as we can.
I can't speak for the group, but I think we've made it very clear that we're committed that every student within the school district gets the best education possible. And there's not one school that offers a better education than the other. To think that it has to be based on what color shirt you thought you were going to wear, we've already crossed that bridge, guys. We built 2 high schools. And when we built 2 high schools, we decided the whole school district would not be maroon. Now, some of us sitting up here didn't make that decision. Some of the people in the audience weren't here when that decision was made. But it's reality. We have 2 high schools. And if we're going to help the community move to be comfortable with being a bigger district, we're going to have to do some things that help with that comfort factor, and reminiscing to the days where everybody wore maroon from kindergarten all the way up is not it. Because, you know, when you look at the number of people that have moved into this district, 1/3 of them moved in, you know, in the last 6 years. They didn't come here thinking they were going to wear maroon or purple, and that was going to be the choice. And so though I realize there will be some adjustment, I think you make a wonderful point, Mr. Harris, is that if the team of 8 and the administration and the staff realize our focus is to ensure that every student in this school district gets the best education, including the extracurricular pieces, that's our focus. It's not what color they wear. That's our culture, is excellent education.
I agree.
I may have misunderstood, but from what I heard, Mr. Harris, it wasn't an argument necessarily for purple shirt or maroon shirt from 3rd grade on, but that there is an emotional argument. Maybe I'm not sure the word you used, but there's, and I think that's true. And I'm not saying I agree with that. But I am one of those families that moved here in the last 6 years. So I'm one of that last 33% that showed up. And while we showed up here not caring what shirt we wore, and honestly, if my daughter got, my youngest daughter, who's a freshman in the purple school now, if she was over here next year, she'd be fine with that. She'd be fine with it. But I do think that some did move here in the last 6 years, and that would be a big deal. Because they bought their house in a place where they wanted them to go to school, and I don't want to get into all of that because I believe things do need to change. Let me say that philosophically I have no problem with feeder schools. I don't want to repeat too much of what I said last month. I mean, I grew up. You know, when I started my elementary school, when we moved and I was in 3rd grade, I knew where I was going to high school. I knew where I was going to go to middle school. But I lived in a place that was landlocked. It wasn't going to grow anymore. And we are. And if you've got a 5th grader now who wants to wear a maroon shirt or a purple shirt, I mean, in the last 6 years, we've grown, 3,000 students? If we do that again in the next 6 years, I mean, we're sitting at 16,000 students. And by the time that kid's halfway through high school, I don't see a way we could do feeder schools. And you know, when you, I can come up with a way to make extracurricular stuff work when it's 3 schools going into 2, but 4 into 3, that's a challenge. And I'm just glad we have several years to figure that out. And I mean, when we were redistricting, what was our word? Boundary. When we were adjusting boundaries. When we were adjusting boundaries, I apologize. I'll be completely honest. As I was looking at that, I got so stuck with what is 2 or 3 steps in front of us. How do we make 3 into 2 work when, you know, it would have helped a lot more probably to look 7 or 8 steps down the road and go, how do we do 4 into 3? But again, as you say, almost every month, Dr. Yokin, I think rightfully so, this is the challenge. This is why we're here. We are going from that district that I grew up in, where I knew what color I was going to wear in high school. And it was a big deal to me. It was a big deal to my family. But we have joined the ranks of those growing districts where I don't see how it's possible. And creating a culture, I trust Mr. Mann for some reason, and Mr. Hadnot. Look at him back there. We've got some good leaders in these middle schools who can create. What was he doing back there?
He was sleeping.
No, he wasn't. No, he wasn't. No, Mr. I'm not going to point out Mr. Mann right now. No, but these are incredible leaders who can help cultivate a culture on their campus where where those kids walk in there. My kids walked in their middle school fired up about that school, and it wasn't about the next step. It was about that day. And if they want to be excited about being a cat or a cub or some bird, when are we going to figure that out? That's what. No, don't laugh. That's what it says in our notes. It's going to be some bird at Welburn.
You'll find out soon enough.
Oh, come on! You can't tease us.
It's all mysterious.
I trust our leaders can pull that off. I trust they can pull that off. Probably if we get out of the way.
So I go back to Mr. Harris, and I have a concern also that if we create these separate identities for our middle schools and junior highs, and we don't have feeder patterns, we don't have the extracurriculars or the athletics that bring those students up to the high school level, and I just wonder, how do we address that? Because I think they have gotten more involved since I've been here on this board. The high school extracurricular folks and athletics have gotten a lot more involved in the junior highs, and I think that is a higher quality of that aspect of it. And so do we lose that altogether if we have these separate identities? And that's my question.
So
Does that make sense?
it does. I think those two are not necessarily lumped in together. So what color we wear and what our mascot is or those types of things is one thing, but how we program and how we support our intermediate and to a greater extent our middle school fine arts and athletics and other programs that we have there, I think is really what you're getting at. And those don't have to do with a color or a name or those types of things. So those will be handled through staffing. And it was given to the administration clearly by this leadership team, this board that's in front of us right now, that said we want to make sure that kids at all three of our schools are not disadvantaged in any way. And so we understand that, and that's what we're going to be working through to ensure that happens. Can't tell you what it's going to look like because we haven't done the work yet.
Something that I think of as a picture of this kind of is, when I grew up, there was only one color I was allowed to wear growing up, and I was not allowed to wear another color. Never owned a color that was like maybe 90 miles or that way, or 120 miles, whatever it is, to the west of us or northwest of us. I know it was a culture that was cultivated in my home, and that was the only color that you wore. And to think that I would wear a different color was, I became attached for a lot of different reasons because of the way I was brought up. I think that's what we're trying to break, is to say, hey, you could go to any one of these high schools and it'd be great, doesn't matter what color you wear. I think that's really more how it's looked at rather than a programming part of it. It's more about, are you attached to the color of the shirt, or we want them to be attached to all three of these high schools that are going to give you great quality education, and that we are going to help the programs grow from all the different ways, the various ways that they can grow using the high schools. And we use the college now. We were talked the other day. I was telling exec, I said something about we needed to, if Blinn College came over here and said they wanted to do something, we wouldn't turn them away. We happen to have A&M in our backyard. It's that same kind of thing. It's like to be able to offer, and it doesn't matter what color you wear. It's just that colleges are offering to come and be a part of our kids' education and to get them excited about going to college, not necessarily which college, it's just going to college or going into the workforce. And I kind of look at it that way versus being so attached to a color of a jersey. It's knowing that we are going to give them the best education at all three high schools, no matter what color you wear. I don't know if that.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense because I appreciate all of the input and the thought that everyone has put into it, and I hear the concerns. And while they're valid, in some situations we are past that initial decision point, and I use back to my comment, we have 3 middle schools. They're not open yet, but the building is there. And so we have to think through how are we going to help the community realize, just as what Ms. Barrett has said, that it doesn't matter where you go to school, it's going to be good. I mean, we talked last fall when we did the boundary adjustment about our concerns about the breakup of middle school students as they went to high school. And Dr. Ely, I think, took very serious our charge to him and his staff that he has to make sure that the things that have been expressed as concerns, you know, whether it be football or orchestra or band or choir, he's got to figure out those programs because it doesn't matter that it doesn't matter that we're splitting schools up. It's the fact that we have an odd number going into an even number, so there is change. So even if we did feeder patterns, there still is that one school that would have to be broken up because of that isn't what we chose to do. But the point being, we can't undo that node. That node's already been decided, and so what I think we would like to see done is the opportunity for the administration to really focus on how they're going to do that well, and us to help work with the administration on how to, as Mr. Harris said, help the community make the transition, because the transition is coming. We're going to have 3 schools. You know, let's work together in such a way that we make that transition as positive as it can be. And what I'm hearing is there is a consensus that one way to do that is to have a identity at the middle school level that might require paint and a couple other things at the cost. But one of the things that my children went through the school district when there were 2 middle schools, and they went to 1 high school. And there was an identity on if you went to AMCMS or if you went to CSMS, and they were going into the same school. It can be done. And so I think that, as Mr. Nugent pointed out, the leadership we have at that age group, let's just get out of their way. They can do it. I think we just have to ask them that this is what we would like to see and get out of their way. And I am confident that next September, when they start playing 7th and 8th grade football and basketball and volleyball against each other, each one of those schools can be proud of where they are while they're in 7th and 8th grade.
If I could just add one quick thing. Mr. Schaefer mentioned a fresh start, and we're talking sometimes, I think, with tongue-in-cheek about paint and things like that. But, 5 years ago, my daughter started at CSMS when they were changing uniforms. And they're still, 5.5 years later, a maroon tiger in their gym. And I mean, and I didn't write a letter or an email, although I know some did. Because it really bothered some people. But I mean, if we're going to do this, and I know we're going to have to phase things in over time, but I would just say let's be as intentional as we can.
Tiger removal moves to the top.
Well, hey, it looks good. But I mean, I would just if we're gonna again, I just think if we're still talking about changing the plant in 6 years, that we may have taken our eye off the ball a little bit. If we're gonna do it, let's do it.
If we do this, you guys, I mean, wouldn't it be appropriate that that you let the administration come up with a plan that could make that happen? And I mean, and then we can further discuss after, like you said, that they could get out of their way and just bring a plan back. Is it appropriate, or you needed something else from us?
No, I think that's appropriate. I'd like to push a little bit more on this, if that's okay with the members of the board, on some of the other culture aspects of it. If that's okay?
Sure.
Okay. So it seems like we're having a couple conversations. One of them happens to be, what colors and mascots our 7th and 8th grade campuses going to have, and how will that work as they move into high school? And the other one is kind of a little different one. It's what color shirts our kindergartners or 3rd graders or 4th graders are wearing on Friday. And I think that's come up a couple of times, thinking about the nature of kids who live in an attendance zone. They're in elementaries, but as the current attendance zones are, they're going to be a cougar, they're going to be a tiger. And so I guess I kind of want to get a little feel from the group as to what level are we thinking about this culture change. So let me give an example. On Fridays, my Twitter feed is great. A lot of things happening on Friday. One of the things that I've seen the last couple Fridays is from College Station High School. The football players and the cheerleaders are going to elementary schools, intermediate schools, and opening car doors for kids. The mascots there, bands there, for kids getting out, because they're they're serving. They're teaching these high schoolers the value of giving back and going and serving their younger kids in the community. Is this a situation where we need to ensure that it's happening at both schools, or every school gets touched, or is this something where it doesn't really, we're fine on whatever our schools want to do, because it's developing some goodwill in the community? I guess that's kind of that's just an example. It's not maybe it's a horrible example, but it's something that I just saw just this last week. What's the board thinking about those types of things? Are we talking about eliminating those types of things, or are we kind of hands off on that?
I mean, I don't think under any circumstances we should eliminate that stuff. I do think what one high school does, they should do at all 3 middle schools, because they have students from all 3 middle schools that are going to be going into that high school. So just like we're not going to, well, I mean, you guys are in charge of that, that's below the line. But just like I think we had envisioned our athletics coaches not just going to where 90% of their kids are coming from and leaving the other 10% behind, I think the expectation would be that each high school would reach out equally to wherever they're going to end up having kids come from. And at the moment, based on the way we are zoned, that means that they're going to have kids coming from all 3 middle schools. So I would think if College Station cheerleaders want to go somewhere, or Consol cheerleaders want to go somewhere, then they should plan to have a rotation through all 3 places. I mean, that makes the most sense to me, because otherwise we run into what we had feared, I think, when we made the decision to not have a 100-100, 50-50 split. The fact that we chose not to do that tells me that every school should have an equal opportunity across those things. Now, to me, that doesn't mean if College Station High School cheerleaders and them decide to want to go out and do it at all 3 places, that means that the Consol people have to do that as well. I mean, I don't think we should be forcing that equality on them. Each high school group should be able to choose what they want to do, but it seems like we would want to at least strongly encourage them that they have kids at all three places. I mean, in my mind, at
He's
least.
I think
talking about
it's
the
interesting.
elementary school, right?
Let me tell you, yeah, and I think that's, but it ties in. I mean, whether it's a K through 4 campus or 7 and 8, I mean, it's the same type issue. I mean, actually, one of the questions I phrased, somebody asked me to jot down some thought-provoking questions, so I did.
That would have been.
The way I phrased, I think what this issue is how do we keep the benefits of 9 through 12 involvement, and a parenthetical, coaches, directors, cheerleaders, athletes, band, etc., while not creating the perception that we have K through 12 feeder patterns. And to me, that's kind of how I saw the crux of it. And it's what we're trying to avoid is creating almost that feeling that I'm going there, in part because of the realities we all faced on the boundary adjustment, that there is no guarantee you're going there. I mean, we may have a population explosion and come in, and as we're examining this, it could be that we have to rezone something for next year. I'm not saying we do. I'm just saying we put some emergency provisions in there. Right, right. I mean, because those are the realities of it. I mean, and as we grow and these issues come up, we don't know where people are going to go to school. And to do things that minimize those feelings that people have that they have to go to school there or it's bad, I think help us. So what I would like you all to do is be intentional about things like that. I mean, you have a lot of very talented folks, including the directors of those programs that are involved, and they can figure out a way to get the benefits. I mean, there is nothing, well, that's not entirely true, that I say to my kids that has the same impact when they were little as an older kid, like a high school kid. I mean, that impact they had on those young people is strong. And I like that. I really like the involvement of older kids who are modeling the kind of behavior we want at the lower levels. But we need to do it in a way that doesn't create that perception we're trying to avoid. That, I mean, we've got a list of $2 million of fit and finish that it's entirely directed to avoid the perception that can be created by 15 minutes of cheerleaders opening car doors.
Well, I think it goes along with what Ms. Barrett said. I mean, she was raised in a home where you wore a certain color, and I get that. But somehow there are people in this room that weren't told at kindergarten, this is the color you're going to university. And somehow we made it out of high school. We made it out of college because what we heard is going to university is important. And so if the people from one of our high schools goes to the kindergarten and opens the door, it's the story that you tell with the fact that happened. And the story needs to be, staying engaged, staying in activities is important as far as your education, regardless of where you go, because some of those kids, particularly in kindergarten, will not go to a high school in College Station ISD. They will go somewhere. I know it's hard to believe. People do actually move out of this community. But, it's the way that the story is told. And I think that the activities that the high school students want to do for the younger students are wonderful. What I do think is important is we can't have a principal in an elementary teaching one high school fight song. If they want to teach all 3 high school fight songs, that there is a fight song in high school, it's fine. But you can't be telling, we had a parent come and say that their first grader was learning and I'm thinking, there's so much between first grade and 9th grade that is enriching and can be good for students in a growth period. We need to encourage them to continue to grow, but we don't need to set them up that this is the only thing that is success. Because as adults, we know the minute we say only one thing's going to make me happy, the probability of that happening is very slim. we've got to keep the motion and keep the kids engaged in higher education, because that's what the school district's about.
I think having both high schools at middle schools, I think is, I hate to go back to the old tagline, unity and community, but I think you hit a good point, having possibly even both high schools go to the particular schools. I mean, what more unity does that put in our community?
So there's a million of these things that we could talk. There's different things in transition issues as we're taking this year to transition to that third middle school. Those are some of the things that we'll be talking about. I just wanted to take the temperature of the board a little bit as to what you're thinking about those things. And just, I guess I'll throw my 2 cents in here. I think it's very valuable to have 2 nationally acclaimed high schools in this town, and I know we all do. And I appreciate the amount of spirit and fire and excitement that can be that can be generated in those schools. And I just would hope that we're not trying to set up a system to where we're trying to curtail that at the expense of whether it's equity at middle school or whenever we're going to have a third comprehensive high school when it comes along. And I think what you said over there, Mr. Harris, a few minutes ago with your question, I think framed it pretty well. If you could read that again, if you know what I'm talking about.
I have it written down.
Yes, if you could do that. I think that helps.
Okay. How do we keep the benefits of the 9 through 12 involvement from coaches, directors, cheerleaders, athletes, band, etc., while not creating the perception that we have K through 12 feeder patterns?
So I think that's instructive. I think that's helpful. From an administrative point of view, I don't want to cut off our nose with spider face. We've got a lot of great things going on, a lot of positivity in this community that we want to tap into. We don't want to get into the high school color policing game. And so I think I think that's helpful for us, that we can do a couple things. One is we can provide that programming, those opportunities for our middle school kids and our 3 middle schools as they transition to the high school, that all of those kids have what they need to be successful when they transition to high school. And 2, that we can help with the overall great culture that we have in the school district, irrespective of where kids live.
I appreciate you saying about, we don't want to squash anything that's going on that's good and the positive. One of the things I think about is I think as all of us have been parents up here, and, I try to stay neutral as best I can with all the schools. And the thing that I find interesting is, I was sharing with Mr. Harris that, my kids did go to Consol, and I had one that graduated last year, and she got on to me for not wearing my maroon shirt often because I told her I was trying to, be politically correct. Okay. And she'd get on to me because she said, I'm out here and I want you to be here for me. And I really had to play that parent board member. And it's tough at times, but once I'm there, believe me, I'm pulling for her and for what, we're doing with the family. And, I found me equally as fired up about my nephew playing football and wearing purple. Again, I wore my gray shirt, but, he wants me to be pulling for him and pulling hard for him. And he's excited about playing football for purple, and I'm thrilled for him too. I don't think that we can, I think we talk this to death sometime, but it's the kids that bring that. And we need to cultivate it through the children. I think sometimes as adults, we get just bogged down sometimes with these things. And I don't think that we can make that happen. I think what I hope that we're saying is, hey, we want you to be in middle school and be middle school and not be thinking about, because it's, to me, sometimes we spend every year going, well, we got to have you ready for, we start 7th grade and we got to have you ready for 8th grade. And sometimes we go to 7th grade and we have to have you ready for high school. And we're thinking about high school in 7th grade. And that's really hard for some of these kids who are just trying to get through 7th grade. And I don't care from what background you come from. just being in seventh grade sometimes is just hard. And when you get to ninth grade, it's just hard to be in ninth grade when you're sitting there talking to me and talking to them about college. So I hope that we all, like if we talk about this, that it's more about, hey, we just want you to be happy where you are. And if it's that colors are, you know, maybe we're getting too far into the philosophical part of it, but trying to just say you are who you are and you get to be a seventh and eighth grader without having to think about ninth and 10th grade. You get to be a K through fourth grader, a fifth through sixth grader, and you get to be who you want to be there and cultivate who you get to be there without thinking about the high school, because I think we as adults do that all the time. I got to make sure that my kid's ready for high school. I mean, I think about baseball players in particular, and I'm picking on them because I've just heard it recently. I got to have my kid ready so he can go here for baseball. And I'm like, oh my gosh. You know, and it's crazy to me because at 9 and 10 years old, they're just playing baseball. They're really not thinking. They're thinking they're going to be a baseball player, big league player, but they're not thinking about, I promise you, they're not thinking about high school. They're thinking about, I just want to play baseball and I'm having a good time with my friends. And I think we lose sight of that sometimes. I think if we'll just, we have an environment where they can grow is what we're looking at, not trying to police them. Or I guess I'm saying that for me. I'm not looking to police these, how we do it. I'm looking for them to feel good about where they are and for us not to be so divided by lines and colors.
It's a good
I agree.
summary. Anybody have anything they want to add?
I think just to emphasize one more time as we do the rebranding, I think we owe it to the kids, again, that all three campuses, I mean, if one's getting a fresh set, I think we owe it to the other two schools so they don't feel like that they're getting hand-me-downs. So I think I realize there's a lot of money on here to do this, but I think we really need to pay close attention to that. So when one school's starting fresh, all three are starting fresh.
That sounds like a good opportunity for the administration to have something to do this next week. Anything else?
Well, I'll just say one more thing, and it's, yeah, right, it's more money. I think the point is made about the kids. I mean, in terms of this involvement down, the kids are tremendous. I mean, don't get me wrong, when they're competing on the field or the court or wherever, they want to beat each other, but I wouldn't want it any other way. But the camaraderie and the friendships they have outside of that are, I mean, it's really neat. It's huge. I mean, I didn't make it. I would take credit for it, but I didn't really even do anything except, yeah, that looks good. Got done with a homecoming mom at my house. That one side of it is purple and the other side is maroon. And to see all, you know, the various.
Did you tell Chuck you did this at your house?
Yeah, but all of these friend groups and watching them interact, I mean, it's really a neat thing. And what it does is it reminds me, you know what, we are one community. Even though on a Friday night or a Tuesday night we put on a different color jersey, we are one community. And quite frankly, we all have the same end goal in here for sure and throughout our district. It's to graduate students that model success as we've defined it in our core beliefs and commitments. And I think anything we do to encourage that involvement and have those kids model that is a very good thing. And I don't know how we go about doing it and being intentional. But I do know you have some really talented people who are probably good at coming up with ideas to do that.
Anything else? So we're going to move on to item C3, consideration, discussion, and possible action related to the 2017 TASB Convention, October 6th through 8th, 2017 in Dallas. And in case anybody was unsure, there's a football game against Alabama with the school that wears maroon in town that same day. Dr. Ely. Good luck with that one.
Madam President, members of the board, and exceedingly less exciting news on item 3 here. Yes, we have our annual training opportunity in Dallas on October 6th to the 8th, 2017. I believe we will not have somebody available for the delegate assembly on that afternoon, but if somebody is planning on staying for Saturday afternoon for the delegate assembly, please let me know so Mrs. Horn can get you signed up for that. No, we didn't give it to Dr. Wesson because he missed a meeting. So, I guess I'm under the impression that 6 of the 7 of you guys will be there. Is that correct? Anybody not going to be there on Friday? Okay. All right. All right. One of the things that we are planning on doing is taking a brief trip on Friday morning to Steele Accelerated High School to be able to look at the high school choice program that they have there. Our plan is, and I'm in contact with the principal, our plan is it's only 32 miles from the convention center. Should going against the flow of traffic. Should take us too long to get there. To be there for maybe an hour or two in that morning, get a tour of the school, talk to some of their students and staff about their program there, and then head on back by the time for lunch and afternoon sessions. And then, of course, we'll also have all the sessions on Saturday and those on Sunday morning as well. So everybody is planning on being there. I'm not seeing anybody shaking their head.
No, but everybody has to be aware that we're not going to be able to go to the legislative session if we do that on Friday. And if you leave on Friday,
Yes,
you still have to get it on Saturday.
There are two, if you are a returning board member, you have a legislative update that's about an hour long. There's 2 opportunities to get that. One is on Friday morning, one is on Saturday morning. If you're unable to get it, at Tasby Region 6 will be able to provide opportunities. They could come in and do it. We could do a regional training, or they will have online training that some of us have availed ourselves to in the past. So we will have opportunities for you to get your legislative update. And it is a little later this year because we did have the special session in the summer. So it's still being created.
I still wanted Quinn to think he needed to go back on Saturday.
Any questions on that?
Any questions?
And as you have a chance to, before you leave today, would you get with Mrs. Horn and just verify the nights that you'll need hotel? Okay.
I got a hotel confirmation for February. January, sorry. Yeah.
Do we have October yet? All right.
Well, what we want to be sure that you do before you leave is let Ms. Horn know what you're going to do for the 2017 TASB convention.
Okay,
Mrs.
so
Horn
that was
has
unrelated to this.
It is unrelated to this. Mrs. Horn has all of your, what's the word I'm looking for? Hotel reservations are, yes, she's got it all for you. You guys have places to stay.
So we'll move to item C4, consideration, discussion, and possible action related to setting a date for the next management oversight workshop to discuss transportation. Dr. Ely.
Dr. Yokin, members of the board, one of the things that I really like about board oversight in regards to the work that we're doing in College Station ISD is that we take time out of our busy schedules twice a year to dive deeply into some of the areas in the school district where we spend a lot of money or employ a lot of people. We call these our management oversight workshops, and we usually meet for about 2 hours. Once in the fall and once in the spring to go over some of these areas. We're talking about transportation, construction, maintenance, operation, purchasing, technology, those types of major areas in a school district. And it is time now to hit transportation again. They are up, and we would like to set a date to have a 2-hour management oversight workshop for the purpose of discussing our transportation program sometime in October. And so what we have, we'd like to talk about some dates that might work for the group. We'll say this, I asked Mr. Glenwinkle to get in touch with Scott DeLucia at Bryan Broadcasting to try to figure out when the candidate forum is going to be. They do not have a date yet for the candidate forum. That will probably be sometime, Chuck, after early voting starts? Okay. Mr. DeLucia did say that it won't be on Monday, so if Mondays work for folks, let us know. That wouldn't, that would help us to find a date. Tuesdays have worked in the past.
Are you thinking like a 4 to 6?
We've done it in the past, 4 to 6, 3 to 5, whatever you guys and gals would like. But yes, that's what we're thinking.
I could do a Tuesday if we were done by 5, but I'm missing too many volleyball games on Tuesday. So
Then let's not do it on Tuesday.
What do Mondays work like for folks?
I have something at 6:15, but if we're doing like a 4 to 6, would be good.
So every Monday you have it like at 6:15, so 4 to 6 is good.
Or 3 to 5. It does not conflict with the 6:15 event. Yes.
We could certainly do it there.
Yes.
I was waiting to hear a conflict on that, but you're throwing that out as an option.
Yes.
Okay.
done.
4 to 6.
That's fine.
That looks good.
Gives you an out for later. We doing it here?
3 to 5.
3 to 5 is safer for Gwen.
3 to 5. Mr. Nugent.
I'm good.
Mr. Harris. 3 to 5.
That's, yes.
I think so. Okay.
They just won't pay it.
We'll let you know. One of the things that we do have at the transportation center, we're doing transportation activities there, and we have 2 conference rooms there. So I don't know if they're full. So we'll have a number of opportunities here to find a room for us.
Okay. Anything else?
It's not an agenda item.
It's not on the agenda. So with that, we're going to adjourn. We'll be back at
7.